then you have 2 listings for every page on Google.
Mm.
Google scans your page as a mobile browser, and they scan your page as a desktop browser. And if they rate them completely separate. So how long does a person spend in your page? That's probably the biggest influencing fact of where you list in the Google engine. And they will also prejudge you. If your website takes a long time to render the page, they're going to guess that people not only won't spend a lot of time there, they're going to bounce and not even go there again. So they're looking at those type of things. So when you're choosing a framework, be it VueJS, Bootstrap, all these different things, you need that page to come up. It needs to hit fast and it needs to flow. Well, that's also Google now no longer. It used to be Google could not go through a React-based site or a Vue.js or an Angular 2 site. These single-page apps, these progressive web apps, they'd hit the first page and it wouldn't display right. And they especially couldn't click through it like they do on a normal site. Nowadays, it completely works. So you can build these apps where you could not have even 2 years ago. And it's the same to Google as without it. But to your users, it's a completely different experience. That first page may be a little slower, but after that, it's just next page, go here, go there. Everything's just snappy. And that's the type of benefit, the new winner's circle are the apps that perform those functions well. And that's why currently I pick React, Vue.js, and Angular 2 as the top winners.
They're
and
the gold,
yes,
silver, and bronze.
Do it.
They're the gold, silver, and bronze in the Olympic winners circle.
Right.
So what
and
you mentioned,
depending what your company's needs are, you can award the medals that you want. And you probably are awarding them right. So it depends on what your needs are, who you have for staffing. So they're all functional solutions. And I don't get into the hostile type approach. It's like, mercy, look, the software is working, right? Yes. It's updatable and you're putting in the new features. You're making good progress. Your company's profitable. So you have a win. Something else may have a different level of a win, but you have a winning project. You don't need to, because you have something that wins more in this anecdotal area. You don't need to sound like a bunch of teenage guys who are, fighting over something because, testosterone's kicking in. It's a new phase in their life and they're just used to that volleying. And I was there too. I remember doing it.
So what is the challenge for these frameworks when they're in that Olympic winner's circle?
I think the challenge is to understand where they win, to establish themselves in the market where they win. I think the worst thing they can do is look at a competitor to leave their challenges behind and start trying to beat their competitor where they don't have a strength. That's a lot like life coaching too. All of us have our own strengths. We have our own challenge areas. If you have a leg that's 2-3 inches shorter than the other, you probably are not someone who should pick a career as a basketball player. Now, you might be the exception to that, but generally, I'm correct most of the time. Well, the same way, you don't try and strengthen the Gallup poll, the organization that does all these giant surveys. They've interviewed over 1 million successful people. And what they wanted to know is what makes people success. And they said one of the biggest things that shocked them is we've always been told if you will strengthen your weaknesses, you'll thrive. And they said out of 1 million people, they couldn't find a single person that held true for it.
So you should strengthen your strengths and find a way to ameliorate the weakness.
Right. You look for opportunities to thrive in your strength areas there's this middle area that's called profitable. If you don't have an opportunity for your strengths, then you do what's profitable and you lay aside some of that profit. So when you have an opportunity, you can invest in it. But your challenge areas, that's where we do damage control. And that's why we have testing and stuff like that, because we need to deal with the challenge areas. And that actually, those same principles carry right over into software development. I mean, even your team, this guy's really good with an API. You want him learning to do some of the other stuff, not so he spends the same amount of time, but so he knows how to talk to the front-end developers. So he knows how to interface with them. It's just like you want your developers to actually sit and watch someone use their code, because Dan and Chip Heath wrote a book called Switch, and they talk about software developers in that book sitting down, and they just kept saying, stupid users, what is wrong with these people? And they put them in a room where the people were using the software, and the light bulb went on. And they said the same people came back from watching people use their software, and they're like, oh, we didn't do that right. We've got to fix that. These people need software they can use. It's like when they watched them, they got it. But when they're sitting in the dark, hidden room, it was just stupid users out there. So that type of thinking, it changes the game. And the whole Olympic circle, these are the tools that have actually gotten out there and interacted with the users. They know how the users are using it, and they're solving specific problems. And that's why React developed that reactive interface. And they have other stuff that goes with it. Angular, they have this super object-oriented dependency injection framework for doing JavaScript. In fact, the more popular way of doing Angular is with TypeScript, where you fundamentally have a fully object-oriented JavaScript. And it's not that JavaScript prototype function. I hate that thing. Whenever I have to look at that, it makes me want to go back to avoid.js. Okay, so go ahead.
Yeah, tell us more about how you picked your framework.
Okay, so let's put these more into bullet point list, and I don't have a pre-made list here, but basically sit down and figure out, why do I want to use a JavaScript library? It needs to be more tangible than, well, the competitors are using it and they're using this one. That's not a great strategy, because it's not just 100 reasons, but you want to know what problems you're solving, what challenges or what benefits you're after. I can remember when I first started consulting, which was decades ago, and people wanted to buy a computer. This was when the computers were first coming out, PCs, and I'd ask them, why do you want to buy a computer? And they'd get the glass-eyed look. And I was like, okay, they're not answering. Why are they going glass-eyed to, why do you want to buy a computer? And finally they would answer, and it blew my mind. They would say, to make more money. Apparently buying a computer was the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Well, a lot of people, when they're choosing frameworks and technology, their decision is they're looking for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but they don't understand this rainbow is nothing more than light shining through rain. It's not a good way to make a decision. You need to think about, what problems is it actually solving? You need to make a good, intelligent decision. Get out there and get counsel. Hire a good consultant. Number two is community. There needs to be a growing or a thriving community around this. You need to have somewhere to go for support, questions. Should be great documentation. Even better if there's good training courses already out there. Another thing you want to make sure is the community has viable funding. And that's one of the things that blew my mind, how many companies, when VueJS 2 came out, it was like they got super funded. All kinds of companies jumped behind it. So I wasn't the only one waiting. And is it validated in real world solutions? That's the never first, never last type concept. And it's okay to jump in sooner if you're testing. but you need to know it's actually validated out there. So those are good ways to check.
Those sound like a great way to check. So tell us a bit more about VueJS and how it makes JavaScript super friendly. You mentioned a few things earlier, but.
Well, another thing that a lot of good libraries have that Vue has, it's not what makes a library good or bad, but it's a benefit to a lot of these libraries, the Olympic Circle I just mentioned, is plugins. And it's one of the things that really skyrocketed jQuery. Well, VueJS has a lot of plugin type things also. It's like, have you heard of, I think it's Flux, the React library. It's used for managing data states. Well, basically, as your app gets bigger and bigger, well, Angular, you don't have to add something in. This has it from pretty much from the start, and they've got tools that are in there to do this. But the one that's known for popularizing this need is what happens is we talked about data having a state, and when it changes, the front end responds to it. Well, that's all good until your app gets bigger and there's more pieces and this data state's impacting more things in more directions. And that's a lot of what my talk is going to be about at Into the Box. Is there's a library for Vue called Vuex. And what Vuex does is it creates a way to maintain the data that's more sophisticated. It is a little more work, especially because there's not a lot of training on how to do it. It doesn't take a whole lot of training. It just takes someone who can explain it without, sounding like they're technical. Just because we're technical doesn't mean we need to sound like it. Well, that's what they do, is it's just a different way to package your data. And some of the things I'll show is how to stick your data in namespaces. So a lot of times when we create a little package of logic, well, up inside our logic, we'll have a name we use for a variable. In a different package, we may use that same name. Well, if you're using straight Vue or React or not watching it when you're creating Angular when you're doing this, what people do to avoid conflict is they start building these super long underscored names. And it's like, okay, we don't need these super brief names, but namespacing takes and packages those down. So here's the namespace, here's the value. And it creates a nice, stateful, manageable data set. And that's one of the things that Vuex does. And it's just solving little problems with that. And as far as that goes, that's one of the problems is you start getting more and more data. Managing that data with jQuery is a super monster. It's a problem that you may have solved it, but it's unique and it's probably not easy to pass on. And if it is unique and easy to pass on, you probably could actually develop quite a following online because a lot of people in jQuery would like to see it. In fact, jQuery had a project, his last name was Morris, a guy from Microsoft that was working in jQuery templating. And he went off and built something along that lines, but he could not figure out how to get it to that level. So at that point, I had a contract with Pack to do a book on jQuery templating, but they couldn't get it to that point. So that's when I started using Knockout.js, which is what I use to supplement my jQuery for a season until I jumped into Vue. So.
So you've been looking at JavaScript for a long time. What have you noticed about how it's evolved over the years, John?
Well, originally there was a challenge, speaking of damage control, where it didn't run the same for each browser. And basically, jQuery, in addition to giving us new features, did great damage control. It was one of the benefits. Because when they changed the browser, the community came together and always did the damage control. So that was one of the progressive things But it used to be you built static web pages. And we would ship them out and a person could go from one page to another. That was it. That was where the web started as far as what we call the web. There was other web-ish type things, but that was when it actually really took root. And from there, we started building dynamic sites, which meant you'd interact with a server and we would change the content and your site could have customized content depending how you interacted with it. But all of the changes happened on the server. As JavaScript has evolved, more and more of this is moving to the front end, and we're doing less of that whole thing on the server. In fact, the new trend, and anyone out there who's a developer is probably tired of hearing this, API, 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 API. It's like all you hear nowadays is API. If you're not doing API, you're a dinosaur, apparently. And I don't feel that way, but you feel like it because it's all you hear about. And that's because a lot of this rendering and managing of the page that we used to do is moving now to the server. In fact, one of the new things coming in technology is the ability to render that first page that's JavaScript rendered. They're doing stuff so you can take and pre-render that page using the VueJS or Angular React. You pre-render it on a, there we go, not JSON, what do we call it? VueJS. Okay, what do we call the JavaScript server? Node.js. There we go. They pre-render it on a Node.js server and deliver it. So wherever you hit the page, it's even more responsive, which helps with that page speed type stuff. So what's happened is JavaScript wasn't just something, started out as something we avoided, or we forced people to use our version of JavaScript, and you came to the website, you had to use this browser or the JavaScript didn't work. Well, nowadays, it's not uncommon. Even some people who do ColdFusion, they mix their site and they have part of the site run off a Node.js server for doing stuff like this, pre-rendering that part of the JavaScript site. So, and like I said, it's become very object-oriented. We have amazing tools like WebKit. What WebKit does is when I'm coding in most of my VueJS, I build this code and JavaScript actually compiles my pseudocode down so it will run on any browser, because not all the browsers will support the features. In fact, you have this import feature in JavaScript, and you'll import and use something, but these packages that you import, that doesn't work on any of the modern browsers. Although you can use EJS 2016, or even better in some cases. So you're using all these fancy new ways of writing functions and everything. That particular feature, they're not looking to push to the browser. You pre-compile that stuff to send it forward, and all these tools are now part of JavaScript. And what's really wild about that, as much as I disliked JavaScript, I also used to hate using command line because it was just non-productive. It wasn't how I was wired, wasn't my strength. Nowadays, I don't think I spend 30 minutes in code without popping back and forth between the command line. So I'm at the command line probably 20 or more times a day now, and I love it because they've changed the whole experience. And that experience is actually powered by JavaScript, except for the other tools that I use were actually powered by ColdFusion, because some of the work from Ortis team with ColdBox. I love CommandBox, and yes, I've written some of my own tools using CommandBox, so because I'm more comfortable doing it in ColdFusion, but I like JavaScript too. So I get to use both of them from the command line, which is something I never expected in the past. I thought we're getting more technical. We're going to be more GUI, less command line, less of these tools. And I found out that, you know, there were some classic benefits to it that were worth revisiting.
Mm. So let's just switch gears slightly. And this is a question I'm asking all the people I'm interviewing. Why are you proud to use ColdFusion?
Well, ColdFusion has given me career-wise something more than any other tool, and that's success. I've been able to help customers win. And we build sites, they do what they need. We're able to keep timelines. And, you know, not 100% win all around, but I've looked at our success ratio and the ratio of competitors. And when I'm getting faster deliver and a higher success ratio, then it's what I call modern ColdFusion. I'm not using ColdFusion 5. I actually build objects. I have stuff like command box. This isn't like one of the former people said, I don't know if it was you or them, that the phrase was, "This is not your father's Oldsmobile." Well, the ColdFusion I'm using isn't my father's ColdFusion. Although technically that would be me because I have a son who's a full-time professional ColdFusion developer also. But he's not using the ColdFusion I started with. It's a very mature feature. I think it was with your interview with Lewis, in fact.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep, that's a phrase he likes to use, the modern face of ColdFusion.
and it is. It's really it has the modern features. I have people that are once in a while skeptical, and I just walk them through some of the features I'm using. They're like, "Oh, I didn't know that." I tell them, "That's okay. Let me know when you're ready to start."
So what will it take to make ColdFusion more alive this year?
When I look at making ColdFusion alive, that's one of the things I look up, and I've mentioned Steve Blank earlier, where he talks about there's no facts inside the buildings that get outside. One of the things we need to do is actually measure what's making a difference. I mean, back during CF United, we talked about there was a decline at that point in the number of ColdFusion people who were publicly visible. And I think that's actually true because more and more of the ColdFusion jobs, like Ford Motor Company, they thrive on ColdFusion. They absolutely love it. And there's a lot of other companies like that. They're selling more ColdFusion, but you know where all the sales are going? Where? Apparently the Wizard of Oz is the one who's buying ColdFusion because it's all behind the curtain. It's places we can't see it.
It's all intranets.
And it is. And that's the reason people don't see that ColdFusion is thriving, because it's thriving in the intranets. Well, with that awareness, that changes the game, which also means it's super business to business tools. And if you can run intranets and business to business on it, well, maybe it can get business done. And what we need, and what I would like to see, someone had mentioned that they thought Adobe needed to do more. And I'm not sure if they do or not. I know it would help if they did more. And where I would like to see them do more is to do more outside the corporation. And I think they've started to do that. They're sponsoring conferences a little more aggressively. And I just hope they keep moving in that direction and measure the right benefit there. It's a different benefit, and I think that'll really take off. I love what Lucy's doing in the same area. A lot of what they're doing is awesome. And in fact, I think the biggest thing I've seen that as I'm dealing with people and introducing them to ColdFusion, I can get a new developer set up and I could get them going on Laravel fairly simply, or WordPress, or I could get them going on Ruby and Rails. But the honest, easiest way I can introduce a new developer is I say, okay, bring me your computer. Let's look for command box. And they download it, and I just show them how to get a site set up with command box. It is the drop dead simplest way to get a developer started. that type of thing, I think we need to introduce more people to command box. I think we need to get more ColdFusion developers aware of it. Because when they look at it and they spin up a server that fast and that easy, I like watching their mouth start to dry out. They're just sitting there with their jaw hanging. It's like, what did you do? It's like you saw everything. That was it. But you didn't download the server. I said, no, it's running in Lucy. It actually did. It's in the box package and the way it pulls it. I said, that's just how long it takes. And they're like, huh? The disbelief, it's when you get people doing that, it is a powerful thing. And what, again, that's the measuring your, what is the pulse? What are we seeing? What are the results? And I think if we would use that to get a whole bunch of developers, oh, who wants to learn web development? Okay, we'll start off learning HTML and CSS. What's the quickest way to get a server set up to do that? Command box. Yeah. And so the biggest win is to get there before they get to the server. The biggest win is to get them from the very start. And I think command box is a super tool for this. So we all need to high five Brad and the Ortis group for that, because it's got some zest.
Fabulous.
And while they're at it, we can introduce them, write your own script. Oh, here's how you can run a ColdFusion page, because the first dynamic language is sitting right there. Then we can introduce them to ColdBox if they want to get sophisticated. And that's, I think, doing that, I think that our secret tool is command box.
I love it. Well, and when I ask people this question, what will it take to make ColdFusion more alive this year? I'm not just looking at external things. I'm looking at what each of us in the ColdFusion community can do.
Right.
And how can we empower ourselves more and not be sitting around like victims waiting for some giant corporation or some other thing to change.
Right.
There are things we can do.
Well, when you
as
look
a group.
at that, look at WordPress. Who owns PHP?
It's open source, isn't it? I mean,
it is open source, but it's actually owned by Zend Corporation.
Oh, okay.
So here PHP is, that has a commercial library that has an open source side by side. So in that aspect, although there's differences, it mirrors the ColdFusion community. You've got ColdFusion, you've got Lucy, well, you've got Zend PHP and Open PHP.
Oh.
And so what was the difference that Catalyst drove their community? And what it actually was is their community projects did a lot more than Zend did. The success of PHP was not Zend. Although they gave it some success, if you look at the percentage, it's not Zend. I mean, mercy, what is it? Over 27% of the internet right now is run on WordPress. Over 27%. Over 35% of all the commerce sites are run on WooCommerce, which is a WordPress plugin. That is absolutely crazy. So what was it? It's how the community came together, their word camps, their synergy. And we don't need to do everything just like they did. What we need to do is get a pulse. Where are we winning? What are people looking for? Let's look at it just like a healthy business. Okay, let's test this out. Do we get traction with this? Invest more. No traction? Shift your investment. Fail early, fail often, pivot. If we will do that, we will see ColdFusion come alive in new ways. So.
That's a great answer. So we're going to be in the box next week. What are you looking forward to at the conference?
I will enjoy being frustrated that I have to only pick one of two great sessions. And I will be more frustrated on day one because I'm going to a class where I have to pick one of 4 or 5. I'm going to say 4. I think it's 5, but 4 is less depressing because I want to attend all of them. In fact, Brad made a smart crack today on Slack. He said, we're going to give John an egg timer, and every 15 minutes, we're going to let him jump from one to the next. I was like, thanks, guy. But so for me, it's just a great opportunity to get exposed. Almost all the speakers, there's just little nuggets of wisdom. And those little nuggets, to me, I just come back and it's like, okay, where can I use this? Number one. And number two, what is the benefit to the other members of the team? I subscribe a lot to Simon Sinek's approach, leaders eat last. So when I'm going, I'm looking, because I know our team, we've developed a friendship, and I know this is where this person focuses, this person's newer, and this person's not yet acquainted with this. So it's, how are they introducing this? How can I show them this concept so it's easier to adapt to? Because everything we do, every new technology is an adaptation. You're shifting from one familiarity to another. It's not that the technology is hard most of the time, it's unfamiliar. Mm. So I want to see all these speakers, they have a different perspective. So I get to learn not just the technology they're teaching, but I'm also there to glean from their perspective. How do you interact with your clients? What challenges have you had? How do you solve those? Because they're solving it with the same technology stack I am, which means their solutions I can apply. So there's probably not a better place for me to go to learn how to win in these areas. So there's that.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to it too. And we get to experience Houston, Texas, which is special as well.
I was in the Navy 3 hours south of there. So down in Kingsville, Texas, which used to be the world's largest ranch.
Oh.
So it wasn't just a tale. Texas did have something that big. Mm-hmm. and they rent the Navy base to them for $1 a year.
Oh, wow. Well, I also want to thank you for listening to most of the podcast episodes we've released so far, John. I think you're probably the most active listener. Oh, I'm happy to hear from any other people listening to this who've listened to all the episodes as well.
Sure.
I've had a whole marathon here. We've done 26 recordings in less than a month. And but we wanted to get them all out before the conference starts. And I just want to ask people listening, if you can subscribe on iTunes, that whether or not you listen through iTunes or Stitcher or whatever, the more people who subscribe, the higher up the popularity stakes, and then the more other ColdFusion developers can discover this and help keep ColdFusion alive. So just want to mention that too. And if you have any other ideas on how else we can make the podcast better, please, let me know. We're always happy to improve it. Well, thanks for being on the show today, John.
I appreciate the opportunity.